Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep,
Say something.
I am saying something.
So you can hear me.
Yes.
I cannot hear you. That's good. These are working great so far. Uh, all right, now say something.
Hello.
Okay, good.
Good. All
All
right.
right. All right.
Okay, great.
All right, go ahead. Thank you for jumping on and debating with me so quickly. Short notice.
I've been trying to debate since a week now, so I've had a lot of people accept my debates, but then they go missing sometimes, and sometimes they're just like,
I
maybe
think
not.
you just scare them away.
Could be, but yeah, I was trying to have a debate. And then this one, actually, I posted this, I think, about 3 months ago. And then I think more than 10 people accepted it, but then I remade it and then I just kept it. So I'm glad that you like this topic. And then, yep.
All right, here we are. All right, so convince me that I shouldn't use the battlefield metaphor when talking about cancer because, that's all I've heard, and it seems pretty apt, and I'll go into why it's pretty apt, but why don't you give me your pitch? I'm willing to change my mind, but you're going to have to, you got some work to do.
Okay. Um, so for the metaphor, the one big problem I have is that I think battlefield is all the time associated with having a winner and a loser. So the winner loser connotation I think is troubling in terms of claiming battlefield. And I know that it actually sounds maybe fancy or maybe good in advertising because like when you say battle with cancer, it looks like it sounds somehow like heavy, and I think that works in terms of maybe advertising for any hospitals or anything. But if in case we go through the emotional part of it, it does not really work, and I think it troubles the patients because it applies a different perspective to how you see it. So other than that, I think battlefield itself applies that you have a control. Like, while cancer patients, if you see it, they don't really have control on what happens with their body. Because, unfortunately, if in case the patients like have the metastatic cancer, I think they cannot even conquer, like, no matter how they fight. So they don't have the control. And battlefield actually implies a level of control one can have. So, and next thing, as I said, the battlefield, the metaphor actually relates to having a winner and a loser. So let's just assume that someone dies. So does that actually mean that you got defeated? So, and the next thing is that in terms of battlefield, like you know who you are against. But let's just see in terms of this metaphor, like with your body. So are you against your own body? Like yeah, so what are you fighting against? And then cancer doesn't really know what it's up to. So it all makes it all confusing because yeah, there are no players, like there are no winners and losers in terms of fighting with cancer, and it's really difficult. And then yeah, I think it does not mean that you lose to cancer. I think you beat cancer by how you live, like what you live and in the manner in which you live. But there's no any necessity of giving like attaching so much of I don't know, a trouble to it. That's how I see it. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, well, a couple things with that. I think maybe we are looking at the metaphor might be a little bit hard by saying that there's a winner or a loser. I think you can more look into the battlefield metaphor means people survive battles. So battles don't happen and then there's a winner, and then everyone involved just goes back to exactly how they were before. So even in a battle, if you conquer your enemy, that enemy is changed, and even the winner is changed. There are no, I mean, I don't know if there's no, but there usually are not bloodless battles. So take an army that goes into a battlefield, they're going to lose a portion of their soldiers, even if they end up winning. So they're going to come back different. They're going to come back changed. I think this can be said about all cancer survivors, that they're going to be changed in some way, having made it through. I'm going to use the term battle, but made it through that fight with cancer. Now, you said that, did the person lose to cancer if they ended up dying? Well, I think it's pretty clear that if we die, then we don't succeed in surviving the ailment. So if we are sick with any kind of disease, we're railing against it. It's a invasion force. With cancer is a special case because the cells change and they start out to be our own body, but we don't not call the Civil War a war. It's still a war, even though both sides happen to be Americans. It just means that whoever dies is still an American. But in the same way, even though you're fighting it yourself, it changes, your body's changed. So it's clear that you're fighting against an enemy that maybe used to be you, just like they're rebelling against you, and you have to get that under control. The battlefield metaphor, I think, fits so perfectly with cancer. I mean, how do we describe treatment options? We make plans. We have teams that come together. We have specialists that do different jobs. We have different weapons, different types of medication, chemotherapy, radiation. We have these different steps. So just like in a battle, you have different avenues of attack. I think the metaphor seems to be apt. Now, like I said, I'm willing for you to change my mind, but I don't think that just saying because if someone dies that they lost their battle with cancer I don't think it implies that losers of battles are losers in the sense that they didn't do a good job or they didn't fight gallantly. I mean, you can have losers. You can lose, and one army can lose, but it can lose gallantly. It can fight well. It can fight bravely and just be beaten by a force that it couldn't overcome. You might call it saying, in the case if they were to be killed in battle, they were killed fighting bravely. So it's not a dishonor. It's not dishonorable for somebody to die in battle if they're fighting for. So I don't think that, I get what you're saying, that it seems like if somebody dies that we're saying, oh, they could have worked harder, they could have fought. I mean, I get that, but I just don't think that that's not how I've always viewed the idea. I don't think someone who loses the battle with cancer does so because they fought poorly. It's just they came up against a force that they couldn't overcome. So I don't know.
Okay.
Did I address all your points there?
Yes, I think kind of, yeah. All right. So okay. So just one small question like I'd have for you is that,
Sure.
So why would it not normally be, let's just say, died with cancer? Like why fight with cancer, or like why battlefields? Let's just say if in case like you are dying out of a car wreck, or you are dying maybe out of a fever, like, or anything, like, you'd not necessarily say like a battlefield.
Sure.
But so why can we not just like have died with cancer? Like, why do you think there is this?
I think in certain cases we do just say they died from cancer, especially if they find it in stage 5 and they die immediately from it without having a chance to even attempt to fight it, or it's already gone too far that there's no sense in doing. I do say they were just killed by cancer, or they died by cancer. I think the reason we bring in the battlefield metaphor with cancer is that nowadays we're able to often detect the cancer at an early enough stage that you can begin fighting it. And the fight is not quick. A lot of times it's months and months, years and years. So it's very prolonged. Because of that prolonged, you don't have a car wreck that uh, happens over the course of 10 years or 5 years or 3 years. It happens instantaneously. So there's no way to fight your way out of a car wreck. But we do use the same metaphor when they're battling to regain their mobility after having a back injury from a car wreck. So that's the struggle that comes across over time. So if something takes a long time and you're having to expend effort, and at some point you can stop expending effort, and if you stop fighting it, if, for instance, in cancer, if you're using chemotherapy and you're using radiation and you decide to stop before you've gotten to the point of remission, then you're going to lose. So you can give up and bring about your end yourself. So it has to be a constant struggle. And if you're going towards, I mean, it seems to fit what, just like we would with a battle, is if you're fighting a war and you just stop and walk away, the enemy's going to come back and take over all the ground that you fought for, and it's going to defeat you and take your territory. We have to fight for every inch. You have to keep going until it's done. So I think, to me, that fits the struggle that people have, the years-long struggle that people have when fighting cancer.
Okay. I have one example in my mind that says, let's just assume like some people do not necessarily want to go through treatment. So there was actually a woman who decided that, decided to actually fulfill her bucket list instead of like going through chemotherapies and everything. She was like, okay, cool. Like I don't want any of these, and I'll just, yeah, I'll fulfill my bucket list. And then later, I think she died with the, what was that? I think it was euthanasia or something. Yeah. So yeah. So what do you have to say in cases like this? Because he chose, like, in your words, he chose not to have the battle because, as you said, like battles would be fought till the end, right? So what about this?
I mean, I would definitely say that why people might say that she qualifies as somebody who lost her battle with cancer, I think using the metaphor of the battle with cancer in her case would not make sense. I mean, I'll grant you that case of someone who's diagnosed with cancer, say they have late stage cancer or cancer where it's maybe a 10% chance they're going to recover, a 20% chance of recover, that they choose not to fight. I mean, I think that that's something that I've heard that. I don't know how. I don't want to go and say that everyone would describe their decision not to pursue treatment that way, but people would say, I chose not to fight, and in choosing not to fight, they decided to do something else instead. I mean, even in that sense, it's still using the same metaphor where they surrender to their fate, and an army can come in this case, the cancer is coming in, and when you're walking into the city, you can say, hey, don't destroy my town, don't destroy my villages, don't destroy my buildings, leave everything the same. We're just going to surrender. Whatever the outcome is, we're not going to fight, and we're going to try to just survive as long as we can. And I think they would even describe that as choosing not to fight. Now, I wouldn't say in that case that they lost, because you can't lose something that you don't fight. So she didn't lose the battle of cancer, but she did surrender and choose to do something else, which there's nothing wrong with that, because, I mean, I'm a realist. If there's a 10% chance and she's going to be sick and not be able to do anything, not going to be able to have, if the time she's got spending with her family is just going to be her being sick all the time and not being able to go out and do anything, to me, that's that quality of life, if she can do it a different way and live a shorter period of time. But I think that's a conscious decision. You choose to surrender to your fate as opposed to fight against what would happen.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a good counterpoint. I mean, it doesn't fit so much in that case. She's not a fighting with I mean, she's not fighting with cancer. She's not fighting against the cancer. Her body is, of course, still fighting it. Even if she's not using medication, her body is still fighting it internally. But I don't want to push the metaphor that far unless need be. So.
Okay. So as I think I told about that thing before, that you don't really know who you are against when you are actually dealing with cancer. Because if you see a battle, it would necessarily mean that you're fighting or struggling, like, to maybe like strive you're striving against something, or let's just say confronting someone or something. But in terms of cancer, because it's yeah, it's so natural that you don't really know like what you're up against. Because in patients like with metastatic cancer, like they cannot even like conquer, let's just see, no matter how hard they fight, because it's just obvious for them to die. So in that case, I think the battlefield metaphor, I think, doesn't work so right. Because yeah, just the same thing, that you don't really know what you're up against. Because in the battle, you know who you're against, you know the things you want to do, or you know the things you have to do to win, right? But in this case, you don't really know anything. You don't have control on yourself. You cannot plan what you can do to fight that particular thing, and you cannot. Yeah, so yeah, that case too.
Okay, I got a couple responses to that. The first one would be there are cases uh, of patients with cancer where they know what you're fighting, right? You would agree with that, right? Take for example skin cancer. If someone
Mhm.
knows they have a spot of skin cancer, they
Mhm.
can see it. They know what the margins are. They can go in. They can have it removed. Uh, so they're even though that's not a prolonged fight. I mean, they know who their enemy is. They can go in and they can attack it. So there are certain cases where the cancer is knowable. They know where it is. It's isolated. The recovery time will come back. That's another struggle. So in every case, the cancer itself is not unknowable. Now you do make an interesting point in the cases where is unknowable. Now, could we say that there are battles or wars that we go in where we're not sure who the enemy is and who isn't the enemy that we would still call a battle? I mean, let's consider we call it the war on terror, or we could go to we could use it for an example. I'm not a military buff, but we could use Vietnam fighting against the Viet Cong. We have this general sense that they're out there, that they're dangerous, and they're going to attack us. We don't know where, we don't know how, we don't know when, but we know the enemy is out there. And we also know that there's some things that we can do to mitigate the damage that they might have against us. So we wouldn't say that when we fought the Viet Cong, even though we didn't know when they were going to attack or how they were going to attack or where they were going to attack us from, we wouldn't say that we were not in battle with them. Well, we have a general idea. We have steps that we can take. Maybe those steps will work. Maybe they won't work. But it's still a battle. It unfortunately might not always be a winnable one. I think that maybe the one thing that would push me towards your position would be that every battle, true battle that we think is at least theoretically winnable. Where in the case of cancer, could we consider that some cases are of cancer are not theoretically winnable? I don't know if I'm ready to commit to that, but that would be one of the that would be one of the there were definitely times that certain cases of cancer were not winnable. There were some times, say 100 years ago, where if you had a certain type of cancer, it was 100% fatality. I would assume. I don't know that for certain. I'm just making the assumption that if we have low survival rates now with the medication that we have, then at some point in the past we had zero survival rates with no medication. So is an unwinnable battle still a battle? Uh, I would think so because if you're fighting for that extra time, if you have goals, even if the battle is unwinnable, then maybe is it still a battle if you're just trying to gain more time for your family or you're just trying to fight and do your best? I mean, I would say that's still a battle. Um, what do you think about that?
Okay. Hmm. A few things to add on that, I think. Hmm. So you talk about how we actually could go on a battle without knowing let's just see who our enemy is going to be. But I think that does not really count, because let's just see, we're taking medicines, just imagining that maybe we would encounter with fever like maybe a month after, or let's just say, um, yeah, I could maybe get malaria maybe like after a month. That's why I can take the medicine now. So it's just like the same thing, preparing, or maybe going on a battle like where you don't really know what your enemies are. That is not really doing any good to you. And another thing is that I think battle, if in case you see anyone would go on a battle only if they feel they are prepared for it, right? So let's just see, if you see, like, most of the times any country or like any province would be ready to go on a battle if in case they are like they're prepared, they have their like armies ready, and they're, yeah, so with the possibility of winning. Yeah, so even like applying the same thing maybe in debates, I think most of the debaters, like, they post the topic when they feel like they're going to win on it, like, they're really strong on it, they have like proper arguments on it, everything ready, so that's when we do it. But in this battle, like, tell me, where is preparation? Like, where are the armies? Where are the soldiers?
I got
Where's the
you.
strategy? Where's the planning? You know? So I think the preparation part of the battlefield is entirely missing on this part too. What do you have to say on
All
that?
right, all right. Um, that's a good. I mean, that's a good point, and that's a fair point to bring up. One thing I would ask you: would you consider, say, a city has a standing army, or a military force, we could even say, and so they have a standing army, and then they have an explosion that brings down several buildings in their city. So it happened all of a sudden. It's one explosion. A little while later, it's another explosion. These buildings are coming down. It's obviously that this is an attack on their city, but they don't know who it is. They don't know who they're going to face. It could be another city. It could be a terrorist group. It could be some rowdy kids who figured out how to make dynamite. I mean, they don't know. So they go in, they prepare the best they can. So in this case, would you say that those people, when they suit up and they go in prepared for whatever they can, they may not be well prepared, they may be over prepared? Would you say that force is not going into a battle when there's obviously something causing damage, and they're geared up as best they can and they go in? I would say that it's clear that we would say what they're about to do is being prepared for battle. They're going to go in, whatever they're going to meet, that's still going to be a battle. So they know that they're going to go into the battle. Is that the best way they want to go in? Of course not. If they had 6 months to figure out who was going to be to watch the buildings just keep blowing down until they could bring in some drones and see who it was that was doing it, they could make specialized weapons. They could do all these things. Of course, they would do that. But when the first building comes down, they have to mobilize. They have to go into battle no matter what they're going to face. And that's why in battle, as in cancer, you do the first string of people go in. Maybe it's not effective. Maybe it's only 50% effective. Maybe it's only 60%, but they get in and they get the information that's needed so that the next round can come through and it can be more direct. They can be more prepared. So just because something has happened unexpectedly and they're not using the perfect weapon, it's still a battle, and maybe it's even a harder battle, because if they know exactly what they're fighting, the battle is going to be easier. When you don't know what you know, I would almost go so far as to say, when you don't know what you're fighting and you don't know what you're going to face, that's even better metaphor for battle, because you're going into war and you're fighting the enemy. You don't know what the tricks they're going to bring up. You don't know what they're going to come up. You don't know what the generals are going to do with their armies. So you don't know exactly if your tactics are going to work. So there's so many unknowns. I mean, that's the definition of a battle, I would say.
Okay. In that case, I think I would not think that it would be a better battle, because I think whenever you have a battle, I think it's about the fight or struggle to achieve or resist something. So if in case you don't really know what you're going to achieve or what you're going to resist, I think that creates more problems. So the battle would not be better, as you say. But talking about the example you mentioned, I think in that case, I agree to whatever you said. But my question would be, let's just say there's an explosion in one of the like apartments um of Tennessee. Let's just imagine, like, okay.
Okay.
So the problem is, the thing I'm mentioning here is that so it's not a battle there.
Right.
because it's happening. So let's just say maybe a child actually mistakenly did something and then there was an explosion. So now in this case, like it's no battle, like Tennessee is not going to fight against anything, right? But if in case, let's just assume that someone else is actually coming and then doing an explosion on it, it's definitely a battle because they're fighting against something. They're trying to, let's say, achieve something out of that because they know that maybe their state is in danger or something. But in this case, it's internal, you know so that's when I don't really want it to call a battle. So if in case there's an explosion because of a child, I'd not want anyone to like tell that Tennessee is fighting against like the battle of explosion or something.
I
So
got you.
this is yeah, this is what I'm referring to.
So, okay, let me see if I can.
Really, yeah,
Let me see
internal.
if I can
Okay.
unpack that a little bit. So,
Okay.
say the standing police force sitting around having coffee or whatever, and there's a giant explosion. All right, so they don't know what's happening. They all gear up in their gear and they go out there. Turns out it was a gas main under a building exploded. There's no enemy. It's just an accident that happened. Now, do you think in that moment, and I'll bring this back to the cancer patient, but do you think in that moment, do those soldiers feel like they're going into battle? Now, when they get there, they find out that there's not a battle, but how do they feel? How are they reacting right there? What is their emotional, I want to say commitment. What is their emotional mindset? Do they feel like they're going into a battle? I would say yes. So even though when they get there, they're like, oh, well, this is just a little gas main. A little gas main that brought down a building, but still, this is just a little gas main. We're way over prepared for this. So I think the same thing could happen to a cancer patient, or in this case, a false cancer patient. You might have a false diagnosis that comes back. They gear up. They meet with their oncologist, with their team. They get this game plan. They maybe even start treatment. It's not unheard of for patients that don't have cancer to receive cancer treatment or radiation. Get in there and they find out, oh no, it's a broken toe that caused something that looked like cancer or something. I mean, I don't know what would look like cancer that's not cancer, but just assume that it's something that's minor. Does that patient, have they mentally prepared to fight? Have they mentally prepared to do whatever steps are necessary in order to prolong their life or in order to beat the cancer, in order to get better? Even though they know that they don't know the details, but they know they might not even have a chance. They have already prepared for battle. So then they're ecstatic and probably will sue the hospital when they find out that it's just a broken toe, and they'll find out with emotional stress. But the emotional stress is going to be, you guys told me I had cancer. I thought I was going to die. So it built this up. So it turned out to be nothing. But that stress is still there. So they're preparing to go into battle, even if it turns out that the battle was technically non-existent in the first place. They were still felt like they were going into battle. I think that, I don't know how rare it is. I would assume that getting that far into the process and finding out that it's not cancer is pretty rare. I mean, I hope that that's rare, because imagine all the stress people would be under if it's actually very common. I mean, man. But if it is rare, you you wouldn't apply them as a cancer survivor. You might apply them as a poor diagnosis survivor. But they still were geared up for a battle. So I think that even the patients, when they know that they're going to be going through something tough, and they're mentally prepping their mind for the physical and emotional strength that's coming, I mean, that's a battle in and of itself.
Okay. All right. So I think you talked about like how the stress could also be considered a battle, but I don't really agree to that point because I think again stress wait, I don't have anything concrete on my mind, but I think stress battle actually comes with like preparation, comes with oh I don't really know. I'll just tackle this point later. But like, I'd not considered this both terms like as the
Sure,
same thing. For me,
sure.
battle and stress would be like two different things. With the example of those armies actually standing up and then drinking coffee or something. So let's just say that they're prepared in some manner, at least, right?
Hmm.
They're prepared in some manner, and that's the reason they're there. So let's see, that case actually applies to us as well, but not in terms of cancer. Let's just say fever or like headache. So mostly if you see in most families, they'll have like the first aid kit where they'll have like the medicines for fever or like cough or anything, because like these are the simple things, like so the level of preparedness we actually referred in terms of those soldiers, we actually, those soldiers, like we actually do have it for us as well, but not for cancer. We had those kind of preparedness for, let's just say, fever or cough. So, and yeah, exactly. So that, I don't know what point I was going to make out of that, but just the preparation is not. Yeah, you go ahead. I'm just
All right.
messing up.
That is I mean, that's a fair point. That's a fair point that uh, soldiers are prepared for a militaristic type battle. Where if you had a bunch of soccer moms and dads sitting around at a pizza party and the building goes off, they're not going to be able. They're not going to have the training. They're not going to have the equipment. They're not going to have anything. They would not gear up and rush out to do battle to find out what's doing. They would. They simply wouldn't do it because they're not prepared for that. Like the point you're making. So, I mean, that's a sound. I mean, that's a sound point. The only thing I would say is that we do have, and of course, I'm going to have, even though I think that that's a sound point, I'm going to have a comeback for it. I think that we are prepared in a sort of way for cancer, but our preparation involves going to the doctor and kicking it up a notch to people who know what they're doing. So, for instance, if you see a crime being committed, if you see people go into the guns into a bank, you don't suit up, you don't open the trunk of your car, pull out your bulletproof vest, strap on your guns, and go in and save the bank. Um, I mean, you might do that. I don't, but I wouldn't do that. So, what do you do instead? You kick it up a notch. You call the police. You call the people who know what to do and to know what to prepare. So you do have a game plan. You are prepared. Maybe you're not prepared to attack them directly, but you're prepared in some other way. So by okay, I recognize what's going on, and I'm going to kick it up a notch. Now, if in this case, if somebody is completely blindsided, I say they die, and no one knows why they die, and then they do an autopsy and find out that the body is riddled with cancer, and but the cancer was the kind that didn't cause any pain or discomfort. It eventually just killed them. I don't know if any cancers like that exist. I hope not, because that's scary as hell. But if it does exist, so did that person have a battle with cancer? Well, no, they didn't. So, but would we still apply that metaphor? We would probably apply that metaphor, but I would say that would be incorrectly implied. If you don't know that you're fighting, I don't think that you can be in a battle. If that makes sense. I don't know if I'll commit to that statement, but it seems like
Okay.
of the points I would give that one to you. Like if someone dies of cancer without knowing, without having prepared for it, without having even called the doctors or done anything, then in that case, you wouldn't say they lost the battle with cancer because they just never had one. They never knew it was there. It would be that cancer was a silent assassin, and you would use another metaphor that another metaphor of violence of someone coming in and killing someone surprise out of surprise. But that's not the case with most instances of cancer. I mean, I assume that's not the case with most instances of cancer. They know that something's wrong. They've kicked it up a notch to their doctor's offices. They've done the tests. They decide to fight or not. But so the metaphor in general definitely fits. And even though I will grant you that maybe it's implied incorrectly in certain instances, I would say in most cases it's an apt metaphor.
Okay. In the same case, what if the doctor says like you're not gonna leave or something like that? You're gonna die maybe in a few months. What if like in that case?
I mean, I guess that's when they decide if they're going to have a battle with cancer or not. I mean, are you still in a battle with cancer if you decide to surrender? That's a hard point. I don't know. I would say that would be difficult. I would say surrendering in that point, or just choosing not to fight, is losing a battle, because if you have two armies and one army gives up, there was still a fight. I mean, even though no one lost any lives, but in this case, if you had one army show up and then the other army didn't fight, but then ended up dying shortly thereafter anyway, just because of the impact that the new army had on them, I would still say that there was a battle. The battle just wasn't very protracted. I mean, of course, I'm going to say there's still a battle. That's my position.
The next thing is that you cannot surrender after you have a cancer. Like, how do you surrender?
I
Yeah, so because let's just see, like, what happens after cancer is that your immune system like gets dropped, and then like not just what's happening with you, but then your immune system also gets down. You're attacked with many, let's just say, diseases or anything. So how do you surrender it? Like, how do you say that? Do you say, like, you cannot even say that I don't want it? Like, you are going to go through everything the other person with cancer is going to. So I think there's no surrendering point in cancer, and that's the problem with it. And secondly, with the gun metaphor, I would say something on that. I think you talk about a person like who's actually seeing another person. Let's just say, yeah, I think there are like two external instances, two external like factors you're comparing. But let's just say that a person lives alone, and then let's just say like he faints, and then the wait no, let's just say two people live together, and then one person faints, and then the other person is there to call the ambulance, like, the person will actually take them to hospital and do things. But what if the person actually lives alone, and then the person is the one to faint? So there's no one who can like call the ambulance, like, so on this part too, I think, yeah, so the one thing I want to mean with this is that the fight, not the fight, but the thing is internal, yeah, the thing is internal, and yeah, the surrender point too.
So, I mean, that's an excellent point. When we talk about battles, we talk about side A fighting side B, but we're talking about cancer. It's not two people fighting each other. I mean, that's true. I mean, I'll have to grant you that point. The only thing I would say is I think that cancer cells are sufficiently different enough that they're not our normal cells, which is why our own body attacks them. We wouldn't say that. We would use the same metaphor if somebody had a severe bacterial infection. Well, he's fighting the infection. And that would be talking about our own body's immune system attacking the foreign bacterial invaders. So his immune system is fighting off the infection. That happens. That's a common thing. It's a common battle that we all go through every time we have a cold or a virus. Our immune system is doing the same thing, but this time some of the time, what we're fighting is the mutated cells that used to be our own. So they're mutated enough that our body fights them. That's what makes cancer so difficult, is that sometimes they aren't mutated enough for our own body to even recognize that they're there. But in that case, we can decide to, once the cancer is detected, we can decide to use enhancements to our immune system. We can decide to use, again, chemotherapy, radiation, external immune systems that we apply in order to kill off the mutated cells. So I think there's very clearly, even if the line where the cancer and even if the line is blurred, there's definitely an enemy. You would say that one individual has an enemy, and the enemy is the cancer cell. It's easy to think of it as an invading army when it's actually I hate to say that your body is rebelling against you, or that your body is mutinying, but I mean, that's what it is. It's basically your own body is turning against you, and being that you want the body to survive, you sometimes have to attack those that have changed. And But I've used this. I used the metaphor before, but that's just like the Civil War, where we had everyone was Americans. One side switched. The North is then the cancer fighter, and it's fighting against the South. Eventually, with our immune system and with the external immune system, we can get it back under control, like we see, in the United States now. That battle's never over. Little bits uh, rebel again and again. When we have people marching because of statues and stuff, is the same thing as if this little bit of cancer's coming back out of remission. So the battle's never over, but the battle takes place, and even if the cancer is our own body, it's different enough that we can fight against it. And because if it was beneficial to the body as a whole, if the changes and the mutations were beneficial as a body as a whole, we wouldn't call it cancer. Cancer is the stuff that hurts the body, and you just do whatever you can to get rid of it. When you're fighting a battle, the mutineers are the ones that are making the country or making the army or whatever as a whole worse, and so you get rid of those. So I would say it is a fair point that in a battle you have two sides, clearly defined sides. In a cancer victim, the cancer and the human body, the host body, are not as easily defined. But just because the metaphor isn't 100% perfect doesn't mean that it is inaccurate enough to not describe the battle that's going on. And we, especially in the United States, I mean, we understand and support soldiers, and we understand that with cancer fighters that they're fighting hard, and that they may not win. And that's one thing I think is another reason that when you're talking about a battle with cancer, is that when you say someone is going through a battle with cancer, you never know that they're going to win or lose or not. That it's never 100%. When you're fighting a war, it's never 100% that you're going to win or going to lose. It's a battle, and you don't give up and you don't quit, because if you do, then you're definitely going to lose. So as long as you're still fighting, then there's a possibility that you still win. And I think that metaphor, even though and maybe in some cases it is imperfectly fits, I think it fits well enough and does describe, cancer as well as many other diseases pretty well.
Okay, I think the last thing I have to say on that is that so let's just say even in a battle, if in case like you go on a battle and then you win or lose, like you get something out of that, but and then you get rid of it, like let's just see if in case you win one province, like you get it and then you're done. But as you said, I think the beginning to that, you cannot get rid of anything. Like you'll be back with some maybe dysfunctions within yourself, even you survive cancer or anything. So yeah, even in that case too, like you still like even if you actually get over cancer, like you still have those things along with you. So again, like doesn't make sense like a battle because you're not getting rid of anything. As I said in the definitional value of like battle, it says like fighting or struggling against to achieve or resist something. So you cannot resist it and you cannot achieve something too. So that just makes it all boom, boom, but it was an interesting debate. I normally didn't have any position on this. So when I went through like topics and everything on Google, so I found this and I was like, it's interesting. Like it's something I think very difficult to challenge if you see, because this is the well practiced rule, like for the metaphor. And then that's why I keep trying like to find topics which could not normally be on my side, like so even for the HIV case, I think that's not the position normally people would take. Well, I'm like, let's do it because I think it's something people wouldn't do. And then I think that's where the fun is, because if I'd be in the op side, I'd easily tell like why it would not be good. But if I'm on the prop side, I'd have more challenges and strategies like to think of. And so yeah, but this was a very fun debate. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it well. You're very well spoken, and you have a lot of accepted debates. They need to get their stuff together and show up and debate. I mean, I don't know what's going on. So you had a lot of interesting topics, and again, this is one I've never really thought about at all until we picked it, and it's interesting debate. I'm not sure that I could make the argument from the pro very very successfully. So I'm glad you took the pro side. But I mean, I can see where that would be a challenge to hold that position. But you have some strong points that you made. I mean, it's clearly uh, when someone has cancer, they're not fighting anybody but themselves, and so it's not like I mean so it's not cut and dried. So you made some good points, and I truly appreciate you just jumping on at such short notice. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you so much. You too.